Welcome back to CEEN Caribbean News. It's now time to go in depth. On September 11, 2015, the world joined the United States of America in commemorating the 14th anniversary of the tragic terrorist attacks in New York and Washington, D.C. Extremists from the Middle East hijacked planes hitting the infamous Twin Towers of New York hours apart and crashing an airplane close to the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The much televised acts claimed the lives of thousands of people and resulted in an 8-year war. Many countries were compelled into stepping up security at their ports of entry, and an abundance of anti-terrorism legislation were launched. These precautions were also taken in the Caribbean. But there are growing reports that Trinidadians, for starters, are being recruited by ISIS. Now, if the region were to suffer a terrorist attack, are Caribbean authorities equipped to handle it? Those questions we pose right now to Francis Forbes, Executive Director of the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, CARICOM Impacts. Welcome to In Depth, Mr. Forbes. Now, is CARICOM Impacts expecting that the region could at any time be marked for an act of terrorism in light of its ties to the U.S.?
Like most first world countries, our mantra in CARICOM is to prepare for the worst while hoping that it never occurs. The reality is that an act of terror is not necessarily difficult for someone with evil intentions to conceptualize and execute. This is the status of the world in which we now exist. We are not flying blind, however, as our capacity and capability continue to improve, even as we strengthen relations and cooperation among ourselves and those with more experience and capability in treating with terrorism.
Now, to date, what has been implemented by the region to ensure it does not suffer such attacks?
Well, there has been a number of structures that have been put in place. Since this 9/11 incident, CARICOM government and security services have been working closely with international partners with regards to putting systems in place to assist primarily with this issue. Examples of systems in place would include information sharing, identifying what we deem as persons of interest prior to their arrivals by ARC, heightened awareness of the local environment to allow early warning as to persons who may demonstrate leanings towards terrorism, etc., etc. Most important, however, are new systems and structures that have been implemented, including CARICOM Impacts and its sub-agencies, the Joint Regional Communications Center, commonly called JRCC, which allows for the awareness of travel patterns into and among CARICOM members, and this unit is located in Barbados. We have the Regional Intelligence Fusion Center, located here in Trinidad, which connects with intelligence formations in each member state as well as similar agencies outside of CARICOM. And in this regard, Interpol also plays a significant role with its global outreach capabilities. And I will go on to say that most countries now have terrorism-related legislation, many of which have some relationship along with money laundering laws.
Now, if the region should at any time in the near future be threatened with a terrorist attack of any kind, be it bombings, hijackings, or the use of weapons of mass destruction, is it prepared to prevent or deal with the aftermath of such attacks?
Well, let us hope first that it never happens. The truth is that as a region, we encourage a continuous state of preparedness among members. But when you recall the fact surrounding 9/11, you have to accept that those with evil intentions can be very creative. An act of terrorism could be severely challenging to our already limited resources, but we have years of experience with coming to each other's assistance in times of disasters, which is exactly what can be anticipated from the outcome of any serious act of terrorism.
Now, with the advent of ISIS in the Middle East and the threat it poses of expanding to as far as the Caribbean, what measures are being employed to ensure the region is neither infiltrated by arms of ISIS nor are the region citizens able to leave in order to join their cause?
Well, there are systems and mechanisms at the disposal of our security services which are highly sensitive, and I cannot discuss them in any detail at this particular time. I can say, however, that the key to our success in this area so far remains grounded in the very high levels of cooperation among local, regional, and international security services. It is very important to point out that we live in a democratic society and persons have the right to travel outside of their countries of birth. And countries also have the right to deny entry based on plausible security concerns.
Has CARICOM Impacts been informed of any cases involving Caribbean nationals venturing out of the region to join ISIS?
Yes, we have had a number of cases, and I will not name them, but we have had a number of cases where nationals from the region have been identified as taking some circuitous route to go and join ISIS. And for that reason, our intelligence community is, paying specific attention to persons who are now known to be sympathizers of those groups, not necessarily ISIS by itself, but those groups who have as their main aim the matter of terrorism. So the security forces and governments working together in the region have done their best to put systems in place that allow us to know who is entering our individual and collective shores, as also who is leaving and with destinations that seem suspicious. You must bear in mind too that we work very closely with the international community, so the United States, Canada, Europe, and most importantly, we work very closely with Interpol, and it is one of Interpol's function to manage their terrorism database in such a way that the over 190 members of Interpol can have access and can have assistance, can gain assistance, I should say.
Does CARICOM Impacts possess the legislative authority to stipulate to the individual islands that they establish laws to deter their citizens from leaving to join ISIS?
You cannot deny your citizen the right to travel outside of your country. Unless they commit a crime and you have them incarcerated or have as a matter of bail that they will not be allowed to travel, in which case you would have to seize their travel documents, etc. CARICOM Impacts, I should say, is currently working on developing a counter or anti-terrorism strategy. We, at this particular point in time, is promised assistance from the Canadian government, and very soon we should have this document completed to be shared with all the CARICOM countries.
Thank you very much for speaking with us, Mr. Forbes.
You're welcome.
We were joined by Executive Director of the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, CARICOM Impacts, Mr. Francis Forbes, discussing how the region has been preparing itself for any eventuality of terrorist attacks or infiltration.